So I love this story, and when it came down to how, I guess it's interesting with a story like this because as I was talking to Sam, it's about the scope of it, like how big it could be, but how personal it is at the same time.
Yeah.
So what was it that you tried to, I guess, make sure to follow with Blake and Schofield as you started the story?
I think, see, the only thing that really matters in stories, especially from a script point of view, is the two characters. I mean, at the end of the day, that's who the audience is going to sit in their seats and follow and hopefully fall in love with. So, I mean, I started from there. And to tell a story of the First World War, I mean, it's almost impossible to tell a story of a big, giant scale. I can't make you care about, 6 million people dying in the mud. But what I can maybe make you care about is a few men, hopefully not dying in the mud. And so that's where I started from, a very personal way and a very character-driven story.
And when your friends and family first asked, how do you explain this story to them?
It's quite difficult, but, well, no, actually, you know what, it's not difficult at all, because I wouldn't have told them it was one shot. Basically what I said to them was, it's these two young guys who are given the impossible task of carrying a message through no man's land, through enemy territory, through all this abandoned hellscape. And if they can deliver the message in time, they'll save 1,600 men and one of their brothers. And if they don't, all those men will die. So that's how I'd pitch it to them.
And one of the things that's really great is we kind of just show up with Blake and Schofield.
Yes.
But for yourself as a writer, did you build their backstory? Because it
yes.
inks a little bit to it.
Yeah.
How maybe kind of how they met, and then Schofield especially, like his past to allow him to kind of persevere.
Yeah.
So what was that kind of mindset like
yeah,
too?
Absolutely. I mean, what you see, I think with any movie, but certainly with this one, because, well, it's told in the way reality is told. It happens in real time. And very rarely do you wake up with a friend that you've been hanging out with for 6 months and say, oh, hey, how's your wife, whose name is Martha? You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen. And so exposition couldn't be delivered in a traditional way. We had to be creative with it. We had to kind of think, how can we tell you about these men without having them tell you their story? Because that's just not reality. But I needed to know everything about them. Sam and I needed to know exactly who they were, because that informs how they would react. For instance, when faced with disaster, when faced with failure, when faced with fear, everyone reacts very differently, and that's based on your life experiences. And so, Blake, who's not necessarily seen any kind of action in the Somme area, is much more kind of like surprised and shocked in no man's land and kind of wowed by it. Whereas Schofield, who's been there before, who's seen death, is very much to the point. He's moving through. And so even though they don't with dialogue tell you who they are, they with action tell you who they are.
One of the things that I loved about this film was just how I could almost see your words and how they connected, but what was it when you saw the artistic nature of how Sam and Roger created I don't know what the best way to say it is. It's almost it's like what they saw at the corner of their eyes, like the extremities of what they saw. They have their own specific blinders, but at the same time, you could almost see like at the corner of their eyes this war, this destruction, all the rats moving. Yeah. So what was your thought on those kind of things?
Sam had described that to me actually before we started writing the script. How immersive and experiential the film would be, how you wouldn't just see, because one of the first questions I had is, hey, they're going in a one big long walk, how are we not going to see everything? How can I in a way write the script where I don't describe every landscape at once? And so he was like, no, it's movement, it's completely rooted in character and what they experience and what they see. And so Sam built that into the script, and then with Roger built it into the film.
And then last, I have to ask, can you tell us anything about last night in Soho?
Not without being murdered.
No.
I can tell you that I am really proud of it. I was on set for it. Edgar's fantastic. The actors, Thomas and Mackenzie, Anya Taylor-Joy, are really incredible. Some of the stuff is
well, it's a horror movie. Did Edgar try to? Is he always try to add his own little flair, or maybe comedic little touch into?
I can tell you, it's it's everything you want from an Edgar Wright movie.
Yeah.
He's not going to turn his back on his
cut. Oh, this stuff, yeah.
But it's everything that it's his cinematic language that he's created over the years, and it's just a slightly different story from the norm that you're telling.